According to the Nigerian Senate President, let the poor breathe. Let the poor breathe. The uninitiated might think that this is a kind plutocrat trying to help poor people. Let the poor breathe actually means let the poor suffocate. That is what the Senate President and his colleagues, who just received 70 billion naira in palliatives that they voted for themselves. That is where the talk of the poor breathing comes from. They voted nothing for the poor. But before I begin, though, before I go into this, because that is our caption for today, let the poor breathe. According to Senate President and the country's president, I am going to unpack it as we go on. But postscript, my broadcast yesterday was about the coup in Niger Republic. Please, ladies and gentlemen, Niger has the longest border with Nigeria. So you can imagine how important it is for Nigeria when it comes to that coup. It does have meaning for the country. Tinubu, as chair of ECOWAS, gave a 7-day ultimatum, 7-day ultimatum to the junta, to that General Oman in Niger Republic to give up power. Well, the other members of the so-called coup belt running from East to West Africa, those members responded today. Mali, Burkina Faso, and Algeria told Tinubu to go to hell. Those countries said they would never support the removal of that general. Let me remind everybody, General Oman took over power because of insecurity issues and corruption issues. That is why the Nigerian elite are so scared. They have similar problems. Insecurity issues, corruption issues. And now, you are now living as the president of Nigeria to go confront the country? Are you a superpower? You have not finished resolving your internal contradictions. The price of foodstuff has rocketed. The naira is prostrate. And you are giving an order to somebody in another country. This was a mistake. I'll do another broadcast on the development. Because those Francophone countries are uniting. As a matter of fact, as I was preparing for this broadcast, I saw news that the president of France, Emmanuel Macron, has withdrawn all French people. Think about this. All French men from Niger Republic. It's never happened. And those people are now asking that other Western countries leave. In the demonstrations in Niamey, the capital of Niger Republic, people were carrying the flags of the Russian Federation. They were carrying the flags of the militia organization run by Prigozhin. Think about that ton of events. And you are sitting here in Abuja, you have unresolved election issues in court, you have a divided country where most of the Southeast do not go to work on Mondays, and now they're threatening to make it every day. You have a failing economy. All of these things, why not face them and allow the Niger people to do what they want with their own country? Ladies and gentlemen, let's go to the meat of our broadcast today. So welcome everyone. let the poor breathe. A couple of days ago, there was an unanimous vote in the Nigerian Senate, a comical vote, a vote rife with comedy, in which, according to the Senate president, the poor should be allowed to breathe. Right after that, the Nigerian Labour Congress called for a nationwide strike. That nationwide strike is tomorrow. They call for a nationwide strike tomorrow, Wednesday. They announced a nationwide strike. And what is the purpose of this strike? According to the Nigerian Labour Congress, this strike is to compel the government to reverse its anti-poor and anti-workers policies. I'm going to really address this very well, because for me, the issue in Nigeria is not poor people or workers who are neglected and not paid salaries. That's not the issue. The issue is that Nigeria is a divided country. And I'm going to prove that to you, because when last we had a strike in Nigeria, a powerful strike by ordinary people, hashtag enters, the North did not strike. There was a strike in Lagos. The North did not strike. Basically, people in the North followed their regional interests. They don't look at things from class point of view. They don't look at it from, oh, these are poor people, these are rich people. They look at it from, these are Yoruba people, these are Igbo people, these are Hausa people, these are, Ijaw people. So let us kind of get that straight so we don't confuse ourselves. That strike was called. Right after that strike was called, the president of Nigeria, Bola Tinubu, rushed a patch speech, a disingenuous speech, to kind of prevent the strike, because they were a little bit scared, because it's in a weak position right now, not knowing what is going to happen with the courts, which, if he asked me, I would have told him to calm down. Nothing will happen with the courts. They will give it to him. But that's a different conversation. So President Tinubu tried to get in front of this Labour Congress strike. He tried to head it off, to discourage Nigerians from turning out for the announced national NLC nationwide strike. This is like, so you basically had let the poor breathe. The Labour Congress got very angry, called a strike, and Tinubu rushed and gave what I call a patch speech that was disingenuous in its content. It was incredible. When I read it, even Buhari, that used to have these speeches where he would list 70 things, of which most of it was for his Fulani people. Even Buhari used to have better speeches than this. So let us listen in for the uninitiated. What does let the poor breathe mean? Is it really let the poor breathe or let the poor suffocate? I'll let you be the judge of what it really means. So I'm going to run the tape and we comment.
Let the poor breathe.
And then Senator Mustafa has seconded that the poor should breathe. Those who are in support of the additional prayer that the poor should be allowed to breathe, say aye. And those who are against, say nay. The ayes have it, the poor must be allowed to breathe.
Rufai, the poor must be allowed to breathe.
I don't know what is so funny about a bunch of guys that got 70 billion while others didn't get anything. And I don't know what's funny about a bunch of guys that are constantly fleece this country with everything they have, or this country has to give to them. And I don't know what's funny about a bunch of guys that just sit up there and big fat salaries that they don't know how much, or they can't even state how much, and they collect over 100 and something billion every year to run a bunch of less than 500 guys. And they sit down there and mock the poor people of this country that they steal from every single day. So I don't know what's funny about that. I mean, it's just reflective of the insensitivity of this bunch of guys. Their fat, over-bloated pockets with their fat barbarigas and regalias, and they laugh at the insensitivity of the pain of Nigerians. But I've got news for them. If only they know how many people have been sacked this week alone because companies can't afford to pay them increased salaries. If only they know how many people that have now packed their cars and trekked the streets of Lagos. If only they know how many people that they don't know where their next meal is going to come from. If only they know how many people that because they cannot get Forex, their businesses can't move forward again. If only they know the pain the people are suffering, people that can't pay for their medical bills and they die on a daily in this country. They would not be making such very, very funny jokes about the poverty and the plight of people. Only to think they are there to represent you and I. Really, senators, let us breathe. It's not funny.
Well. That was Rufai Oseni, a political commentator on Arise Television. And ladies and gentlemen, remember, this TV studio is actually owned by a member of the establishment. They are one of them. But they are able, because the country is in trouble, to have people like this try to speak the truth to power. You saw the way the Senate president and his colleagues, the guy who moved the motion, Senator Mustafa, this was the motion, let the poor breathe. That's the motion. And it carried. And have you noticed it carried when they did not vote one single penny for poor people? They did not vote 1 red cent for poor people in Nigeria. But you know what they did? They voted 70 billion for themselves. $70 billion for themselves. They voted and assigned this money for themselves, for what they call the National Assembly, which is really the Senate and the Federal House of Representatives. And by the way, on the heel of this, the president of the country, that is why I'm including Bola Tinubu in this let the poor breathe thing, because he is also trying to suffocate the poor. Bola Tinubu had proposed a palliative for what they call poor Nigerians, 12 million. Nigeria has a population of more than 200 million people. So he proposed a palliative of 8,000 naira each for each family of 12,000 people. 8,000 naira. But 109 people voted 70 billion as a palliative for themselves. 109 members of the Nigerian Senate voted $70 billion for themselves. And the president was trying to hand out 8,000 naira each to 12 families he considered to be 12 million. I mean, the numbers, he feels that the 12 million people, which is a joke. Because Nigeria is the second poorest country in the world. And that's what you had here. So basically, you had this type of situation where these senators are able to mock the poor, mock the workers. I'm using the poor in a symbolic sense because really, there are a lot of people that you would not consider poor in Nigeria, but they're struggling. University professors have not been paid their promised salaries since they cut a deal to get them back to school about a year or so ago. They are kind of poor by Nigerian standards. And what I just showed you on that video is political theater. That is political theater. That political theater is evidence that Nigerian illiberal democracy is rotten. The governance system running in Nigeria today, which is an illiberal democracy, it is rotten, and it is rotten from within. The rot is from within. Another evidence that this governance system only works for those fat cats you saw today dressed in colorful, flowing tribal robes. Robes in which they bought from allowances they got from the Senate, what they call dressing allowances. from the Senate. Each of those senators you saw in the chamber of the Senate, from the Senate president down to the arrogant sponsor, Mustafa, that's Senator Mustafa, all of them reportedly earn about $2.5 million a year. $2.5 million per senators. We have 109 senators in Nigeria. That is the salaries they reportedly receive. By the way, some of them claim, oh, well, those are not the total. We have not been able to get the number right. Well, what is the number? They have not given us the number. The revenue mobilization, the board, the people that do revenue mobilization have not given us the number. So nobody really knows. But investigative journalists who have spoken with the senators, who have spoken with Senate accountants, have come up with that figure, $2.5 million. And as I will repeat, the Senate has not denied that amount of money. They've not denied it. If they've denied it, they've not told us how much they earn. Think about this. And this is supposed to be a democracy. Nobody knows how much the government, the legislators earn. Nobody. According to them, we know that's $2.5 million. 109 of them. So basically, every year, the country spends $273 million. Let me repeat, dollars, not naira, in remuneration for those fat cats. And according to Rufai Hussaini, with their fat, bloated pockets. I would add, and their fat, bloated egos and other things. That's the total they get. Today's naira exchange rate is approximately $1 to maybe 800 naira or so. Some people think it's late 800s, but it doesn't matter. It's about 1 naira to, so please do the math. Tell me how many billions of naira these guys are appropriating for themselves. This is not including the constituency allowances they receive yearly. I've not included them. So for them to sit there and mock poor people in Nigeria and mock people who cannot live like them, they provided vehicles by the government. They provided allowances for their living. You have to pay their rent. You have to give them money for those flowing agbada that they wear. You have to give them money to buy newspapers. I mean, there is no such country as Nigeria on earth. And by the way, I should mention that the 8,000 naira palliative that the President Tinubu promised 12 million people, he withdrew it recently after an outcry. After a strident outcry by people, that was actually withdrawn. Let the poor breathe. So when the Senate president laughs, of course he will laugh. When all those senators guffaw, when all those senators mock and laugh, you could hear some laugh ring through the Senate chambers. They all have their children studying overseas. They all receive health care overseas. They all rely on money from the Niger Delta because Nigeria produces nothing. That Senate is not going to be able, like other Senates, to pass a single bill or do anything to encourage any kind of production in the country. They are sitting there. They have no solution to the country's problem. They come in, a lot of them, through rigged elections. So when they mock at people, let the poor breathe. I don't find it funny. I don't find it funny at all. It is not funny. It is disgraceful. It is disgraceful. And there is something negative. There's something of lack of empathy for other humans by these characters. There is. How long they'll be able to get away with this sham in Nigeria of having this system? We just have a few of them legally because they simply vote. That's all they do. And what did the president do? Because after this, the NLC, the Labour Congress, has commenced what they call mass mobilization ahead of its planned nationwide strike, which is scheduled to begin tomorrow, Wednesday, the 2nd of August, 2023. And as I said, and I'll quote them, that this strike is to compel the government to reverse its anti-poor and anti-workers policy. That's it. That strike starts from tomorrow in Abuja. That strike begins at 7 a.m. at the Unity Fountain, Abuja, tomorrow. By the way, when I see Unity Fountain, look at the names of these places in Abuja. Unity Fountain. Which Unity Fountain? When people at the center hate people in the southeast. When people at the center look down on people in Akwa Ibom. And there's unity. Of course, unity is that a group comes together and runs the place and brings in somebody like Akpabio to supervise the thing. Akpabio's powers are not really his. It is what the big nationalities that run the country, they just put him there. I wish I was wrong. Or someone could say, no, it's not true. So right after the NLC came out and announced this strike, the president rushed and gave a speech. As I said, that was to head off the strike, to head off the NLC announced strike. The moment he announced that strike, I knew what was going to happen. Because we witnessed what happened with hashtag and SARS. We witnessed it. Hashtag and SARS was police brutality in Nigeria. But do you know what happened? That the people in the southern part of Nigeria, especially in the Lagos area, felt that they bore the brunt of the brutality, where the police could just kill anybody. They could just stop anybody. There is no law and order when it comes to what Nigerian police and Nigerian military are able to do. As a matter of fact, at the international level, the Nigerian military has been described by human rights organizations as one of the most brutal against civilians. And their own people, they don't fight in wars. They don't fight Boko Haram that has taken over the Northeast. They don't. They leave those alone. They are more interested in going to the Southeast with Toscano jets and bombing Olu in the Southeast. That interests them more. But they don't fight real fighters. They don't fight the Islamic fighters who have taken over areas in the country. Those ones they don't fight. So basically here, you have this strike declared. I'm going to make predictions in this strike. I think there's nothing smart about my predictions because it is already clear. The moment that strike was announced, this is a very popular strike by the National Labour Congress. It's popular because the country is really in shambles. I listed the problems of the country earlier. But what you have here is that you're going to see different parts of Nigeria. Nigeria is a very peculiar country. It should not be as a country. Because the nation, the various nationalities don't like each other. The elites don't mind coming together to share money. Don't get me wrong. Do not get me wrong at all. Wike, the former governor of Rivers State, is very happy to go to the Senate and be approved today. You see him there with Mustafa, all these people, the greeting hands. That's not the issue. It's not the elites are okay. In fact, they sow the division in the country. They purposely sow it to divide the country so that they can be able to carry on the way that they're carrying on right now. So for people like me, we wish we could see something different. I was a national student leader in my late teens and early 20s in Nigeria. We would call a strike during the Ali Must Go demonstration. And we will make sure that all the universities in all parts of the regions, all parts of the ethnic nationality location, no matter where they were, that were won. I still recall when we had the famous Ali Must Go strike, where we shut down all the universities in the country because we felt that education, university education, should be free in the country. And the country had the money to do it. It was free. We just did not, they wanted to introduce school fees. That was one of the things. It was a pro-democracy strike, but what I'm giving to you is what was like the immediate cause. We had immediate and we had remote causes of the Ali Must Go strike. I remember the students from University of Nigeria and Nsukka. You have to remember that our strike was just a few years after the Civil War. It was not a long time. The Civil War ended in 1970. The Biafran Nigerian Civil War. So we would go out of our way. I traveled to Enugu to meet Jim Nwobodo, who at that time was a very prominent political figure of the former East Central State, which is essentially the state that you had the Igbo leaders. I mean, where you had the Igbo group from. When there was talk that our colleagues in University of Nigeria and Nsukka may not really want to do this strike because they were afraid. I mean, the Civil War had ended, and they felt that as Igbos, they were going to be blamed for any kind of disruption, even though this was a fight for rights, for pure male human rights. We made sure we traveled, we met Igbo, we made sure that our Igbo colleagues were able to take part, and they took part. And they took part successfully. We had a successful strike. But could you do that in Nigeria today? No. Nigeria is divided along ethnic lines. Nobody wants to talk about this. Have you noticed that when, for example, there were issues in Iraq, between the Iraq and the US, between Saddam Hussein and the talk was, oh, Saddam was a bad guy, he has nuclear weapons. But what people did not mention was that the ethnic groups they were at each other's throats. But people like to sweep things under the carpet, forgetting that by not bringing it up and fixing it, it will not go away. It will not go away. That's the point. NLC has called a strike. As I said, a legitimate strike. They have a right to peacefully demonstrate by the Nigerian Constitution, by the African Declaration of Human Rights. They have a right. So it's not, nobody's doing them a favor here or permitting them. No. They're exercising their rights. After what we saw happened in the central bank with the money, currency, where poor people saw the currency devalued, could not even get the new currency, old currency, a very Nigerian thing of confusion. Very Nigerian. And people suffered. And then Tinubu became president in May. He immediately announced the removal of subsidy. So you understand this. This simply means that the price of fuel will shoot up. The price of kerosene for cooking will quadruple. Generally, it will create a tense situation in the country for most people. Not the elites, not those senators with their big babariga. No, 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 no. In fact, those ones benefit from this. And the Naira was collapsing because of round tripping from prominent businessmen in Nigeria, from banks in Nigeria, people who are given privileges, people who are given privileges to who essentially have to use the federal government gives them collaterals, like the case of Dangote, to build refinery. You have to give him money. Collateral. You have to basically, go and borrow whatever you want. The oil money is here. And people are now about to protest because they are not stupid. They know that if they are not careful, the country's wealth will be handed over to these plutocrats. Already they're trying to privatize the NNPC, the Nigerian National Petroleum Company, where basically they privatize, basically hand over the petroleum company to individuals. Even in the most base form of capitalism, you don't do that. You don't hand over to individuals. And which individuals are we talking about here? The individuals that we are talking about are not the ones from the oil producing area who suffer the pollution, who suffer the environmental degradation, who suffer from the fact that they cannot continue their traditional ways of subsistence, like fishing. I'm from Akwa Ibom, so I'm very familiar with this. Akwa Ibom is the #1 income earner in Nigeria. I'm very, very familiar with this. But we know, as they're about to hand over an NPC, they're going to wangle, give an NPC, give it to people, their group. They're going to give it to their own ethnic nationalities, to people from their ethnic nationalities. And they're going to forget that Nigeria is supposed to be a country. We are supposed to have equality for all groups. You cannot go to Idaho and take potatoes from Idaho and sell and say it belongs to Washington, D.C. That's what is happening in Nigeria. You cannot go to Miami and take the money from tourism in Miami and distribute to everybody in America. Or any other country, you don't see that. But in Nigeria, that's what happens. People from specific ethnic nationalities come to the Niger Delta, take everything. Right now, they're about to hand over NNPC to a few individuals, and they're not going to do it transparently. Everybody already knows that. People don't expect the transparency. So why do you think then that a strike, that is an important strike, to highlight, according to NLC, the anti-poor and anti-worker policies, to highlight it? That's what they wrote in their thing. But I know that this has nothing to do with anti-poor and anti-worker. What do I mean by, maybe I shouldn't put it this way. Yes, it has something to do with poverty. It has something to do with workers' rights. The problem is that the worker sitting in a place like Lagos or Ibadan might feel, this thing is not anti-me because a Yoruba man is president. That's how Nigeria is. And that's sad. Look, I know some people don't want to say this, but we need to say this because we need now Tinubu to come out and say that's not the case. Right? That's not the case. I want to unbundle NNPC, privatize it. I am allowing most of the people to take it over privately to come from Akwa Ibom and Niger Delta where the damn oil is produced. Let him say that. And then people like me are not going to be able to say that the division of the country's wealth is based on ethnicity. Countries were produced by only one small region. So you're going to have a strike for everybody? Let's say, if everybody joined, because people, in our time, we had a strike. Nigeria was a real, nation then. We all felt we belonged. Today, many people don't feel that they belong. They don't. They feel that they are appendages to some plutocrats that have taken over. And don't get me wrong, I may say to you that some plutocrats from the north of Nigeria and some the western parts of the country, I may say, oh, those are the people around the country. But the truth of the matter is that they always make sure they pick some symbolic person from Akwa Ibom and from other places. So the person will just be an appendage. And they will then carry out their anti-people policy. Because funny enough, when they carry out these policies, when they share the oil wells, they don't give to their own people, they take it themselves. But they take it. The point remains that they take it. The point remains that the oil blocks in Nigeria, Akwa Ibom, for example, does not have anyone who was awarded a single oil block, even though most of the oil is produced there. That point remains. That's not the point you can run away from. Now, I'm using Akwa Ibom because I'm more familiar with it. But I bet you people in other parts of the country can make this argument. That's why when you are calling this strike, you have to be careful. You have to make sure that the strike is truly national. You cannot have a situation of what we have now. Let me give you an example. This strike is called for Wednesday. It's called for Wednesday. And where you have the highest concentration of workers in Nigeria is Lagos. Like workers who belong to unions, real workers. It's Lagos. But do you know that the moment NLC announced the strike, the Lagos NLC backed out of the strike? They backed out. Lagos NLC. And let us not try to deceive ourselves here. Lagos NLC backed out of this strike because the president of Nigeria is now from Lagos. It's not complicated. That's why they backed out. Remember, Lagos was the center of #EndSARS. Lagos is the center of some of the biggest fights for civil rights in the history of Nigeria, up until recently. But the moment you make somebody from there president, it's over. The NLC backed out. Lagos NLC. So the Nigerian National Labour Congress in Lagos is suddenly now gone shy because their guy is the president. That's it. They're gone shy because their guy is the president. So the National NLC are very upset. They have referred to them as scabs. They have called the Lagos NLC turncoats. They have called them traitors. Scabs, turncoats, traitors. Those are the names they're giving to Lagos NLC now. I say that Lagos NLC backed out of that strike, according to them, because of the fact that Tinubu is from there. Tinubu is from that part of the country. That's my point. Bola Tinubu is from that part. That's why, look, when I'm saying this, I'm saying what I really believe is the case. And I stand to be contradicted. I would love to be contradicted. I welcome pushback. The moment I heard about that, that was some points I was making. But you know what? The Lagos NLC have actually, they essentially made my point. They issued a press release because people were wondering, why are you backing out? They issued a press release. They accused the NLC, Ajero, the national president, the Nigerian Labour Congress, Look, let me kind of explain to some people who don't know. The Labour Congress is a very powerful organization. As a young person growing up in Nigeria, I marched when NLC marched. It was a patriotic organization. Today, it's ethnic-based in the individual reactions. It is. Look at this. The Lagos NLC accused the main whole of NLC as being biased. What does that mean? Biased how? They're calling a strike for all workers in Nigeria. But they've been accused of being biased. And I'm going to use some of their words. Bias is from them. That's not my word. They use that. They said it's one-sided. This is in an official press release issued. And they say that the Lagos NLC is one-sided because of the fact that the Lagos NLC supported, according to them, Obi's, quote, Obi's Labour Party, unquote. So their point is, well, NLC supported the presidential aspirations of Peter Obi, who had joined the party and was running for president. And that NLC is now saying that that was a wrong thing to do. But they were there. Obi came to their party and joined. NLC is a national party. But they cannot deceive somebody like me. Their anger here, they've said it, that NLC is one-sided. And according to them, I'm going to use their word that for the first time, NLC supported Obi, quote, Obi's Labour Party, unquote. We've had people run on the Labour Party before. But Obi was a legitimate presidential candidate. And that Lagos NLC felt Obi should not be supported. They're saying it now. They didn't say it then. They're saying it now that somebody from Lagos is a president. And they're using it to divide the country. Don't get me wrong, we have pockets in the Southwest, like in Ibadan, for example, where people are organizing a strike to prevent reduction of salaries. But let's be clear about what is going on here. Somebody's going to sit down somewhere and say, I'm not joining this strike because an Igbo man is the president, a Yoruba man is the president, a Lagos man is the... That is the truth. Because if you confront people like that, then they're able to say, no, it's not true. And then why are you not then part of the strike? Most reasonable people in Nigeria know that this strike is very important and it is a strike that should be allowed to happen to pressure this particular government that is about to hand over the country to IMF, that is about to share the oil proceeds in the country, to share the NNPC to individual ethnic warlords. They're about to do that. So this strike should be welcomed by everybody. That no, Nigeria belongs to everybody. That no, poor people should not be mocked in Nigeria. People whose children are going to school in the US, of which they've paid the money, they are going to school in the UK, they're going to school all over the world except Nigeria, and they have ruined the educational system in the country. No. So to head off this strike, the president gave a speech yesterday. When I read the speech, I was almost laughing throughout. First of all, there were a lot of disingenuity in the whole thing. It's very hard when you think about it. So that was Tinubu's reaction, is to rush and give a speech where he would say, don't worry, I'll give you palliatives. You know, it's like a grandfather. And we're supposed to believe him. Oh, he will give palliatives. Don't worry about it. The price of oil, my quadruple. But then this mysterious palliative that nobody has seen. The last palliative he tried to give 8,000 naira for 12 million families, he withdrew under pressure just a couple of weeks ago. And now he's able to rush because this strike is tomorrow, and then he's able to come here and essentially give this disingenuous speech. That's what he's able to do. And do you know what the Nigerian Senate did in reaction to the strike? They passed a bill to stop the strike. Where did you ever hear this before? People are exercising their right. The senators who are supposed to represent people pass a bill to stop the nationwide strike. That's what they did. Of course, they're not worried. The Nigerian elite are not worried. The president is not worried. The president used to lead strikes himself. So he knows that all you have to do is to take care of these people. The Nigerian labor movement is not united. Ethnic and regional interests supersede the interests of Nigerian workers. And the people running Nigerian government today were former strike activists. So they know what they're doing. So the president gave a speech, thinking that the speech would do the job. I don't know who his speech writers are, because at least when you want to measure of a little bit, something real in the speech. There was nothing real in that speech. That speech had 40 numbered points. 40! In a nationwide speech? The speech starts by telling us, I don't want to go into the arcane economics of the country. But that's what you did. You went through 40 things. I will only just point out a few. For example, the president said on the speech, and I'll quote, "For years, I've consistently maintained the position that the fuel subsidy had to go." That's not true. That is actually not true. The president fought against fuel subsidy when Goodluck was president. He went on strike. Some of his ministers today, they were on strike together against fuel subsidy. In the speech, he claimed the whims of the few should never have a dominant sway over the hopes and aspirations of the many. I mean, what kind of rhetoric is this? He is the few. The president himself, he himself is the few. He says, if we are to be a democracy, the people are not the sovereign power of money, but the sovereign. Well, if we're going to be a democracy, why not fix let's allow the courts to make their decisions on the election, which people clearly made very strong allegations that the election was rigged. All the foreign observers, almost all of them, the Europeans, the foreign observers in their thing, they pointed out that the Nigerian election was very, very weak and that it was rigged. In that speech, he said, for example, that he's working in collaboration with labor unions to introduce a new national minimum wage. Come on. Who are you deceiving? Which labor unions? The one in Lagos? Because your labor union in Lagos refused to join the strike because it is your labor union. So which new national minimum wage? What does that mean, even? New national minimum wage? It really doesn't mean anything. Let us be honest. There's no such thing as, because what is the minimum wage? What has the minimum wage got to do with anything? Meet with the labor leaders, which you refused. Meet with them. There's a whole series of things he could do to help poor people in Nigeria, but he's not going to do it. Part of the reason he cannot do it is that he is working with the IMF, with this international, World Bank. These are the people. These are the organizations partly responsible, because Nigerian politicians are the ultimate people who have to decide whether they want to do what the IMF wants. The IMF wants the Naira to float. They don't care whose ox is God, as long as business people can make money from that. He says in the speech, we shall fulfill our promise to make education more affordable to all and provide loans to higher education students who may need them. I have a solution. Bring your children, your grandchildren, your cousins back. Let them come go to school in Nigeria. Because if the children of all those elites were in Nigeria in school, the educational system will certainly be because they're not going to want their children in bad schools. But no, all their children are overseas. All of them. I'm just giving you a taste of that speech. That's a taste of it. But when you read the whole 41 points, that's an amateur attempt to deceive people. The problems of Nigeria, we know what they are. I stated part of them. Those are what needs to be fixed. All of this other cosmetic stuff, all of this other cunning, roundabout rhetoric is not going to help. Unfortunately. But if you ask my opinion, what can be done? It is hard. Are you going to be able to change the mind of a man or woman who gets into the Senate, gets paid $2.5 million a year, not counting the constituency services money is receiving, which are in tens of millions, sometimes hundreds of millions? That constituency service money, I'll make it clear to everybody, he takes it to his state and he buys a few hair dryers for a few women. The rest of the money he uses to buy houses in Houston and in London. Let us be clear. So you really can't go to that person and tell the person, well, let us look for let us redo it. Let us reform. It is not going to work. The person is not going to accept. He has no pressure. I just gave you a strike which is going to devolve into ethnic quarrels. But you don't have ethnic quarrels when it's time to give 70 billion to the Senate. No ethnic quarrel then. You don't have ethnic quarrels when it's time of a Milocon. When it's your turn, there's no ethnic quarrel. But when it comes to these other people, suddenly, the Lagos that I grew up in now has now belonged to one person or the other, one group or the other. It doesn't belong to the country anymore. Because the truth of the matter is that if there are people who are making claims to Lagos, then people can make claims to Akwa Ibom too. And say, you can't take a whole either. How about that? You cannot, there is no way out of this. Clearly, there is no way. It is going to get worse and worse and worse. Thanks for watching and listening. Subscribe to our broadcast. Be good, be well, be active. I am Ofiong Akwa. Goodbye.